Hi, I'm Siobhán Fletcher and welcome to the latest edition of our newscast. So if I could go around you, I suppose I'll go on my left to right, if you could just introduce yourself for me.
So my name's Becky, I'm a police officer in the Isle of Man Constabulary and I work within Protecting Vulnerable People Safeguarding Adults team.
And my name's Emily Perkins, I'm the Detective Sergeant of Becky's team in the Protecting Vulnerable People unit.
Lorna Trevethan, CEO Victim Support.
Karen Ramsey, Chair of Crimestoppers Isle of Man.
Perfect. Okay, so we're talking today about domestic abuse. There's a big national campaign being run at the minute from Crimestoppers. So I suppose, first of all, I'll turn to you first, Karen. I'll put you on the spot. What's that message that Crimestoppers are currently trying to get out? And I suppose, at the simplest terms, what is domestic abuse?
In terms of domestic abuse, I'd like to leave that to perhaps the police and victim support to talk about that in more specific terms. But in general, what we're talking about is that anybody can be a victim of domestic abuse. And what Crimestoppers are trying to encourage are people to report anonymously if they don't feel that they can go to the police or any other agency. And that's certainly an option that we want to let people know about, whether people are colleagues, whether they're family members or friends. If they're seeing something that concerns them and they feel that they want to get help for that individual, if the individual themselves wants to get help, then there is a telephone number that they can ring, which is 0800 555 111, or there is a website they can go to, Crimestoppers, and they can fill an anonymous online form in, which is they can find that at crimestoppers-uk.org. It's completely anonymous, they will never be traced, but it gives them an opportunity to raise that issue, and that will be fed back to the constabulary here in the Isle of Man. So it doesn't come to the Isle of Man constabulary directly, there's always that anonymity 100% of the time.
I suppose, why is it important then that there is that option? Do you sort of see people wanting to come forward with concerns but maybe are concerned about going to that first step, going straight to the police? There
are so many reasons why people don't feel that they can go to the police, or indeed sometimes an agency in a small island like the Isle of Man. So that's just another way that people feel that they can have their voice heard and feel that they're trying to do something. It's a phrase that we sometimes use about being an active bystander. Don't feel that you're powerless. Feel that there is something that you can do.
Perfect. And so I guess just to jump round to the police then, just for the Isle of Man picture, because you're right, we are a small community, and do you get people coming forward with concerns, and would you encourage people to do that as well?
Yeah, it's definitely encouraged. We know a lot of people, by the time they reach ourselves, police, potentially a lot of abuse has gone on before that as well. So for people that are concerned, or if a survivor doesn't want to come to us straight away, it's important to gather that information. So it's held anonymously on our systems, but it forms part of a bigger picture, and if we have one call, that might be backed up by information we have from Crimestoppers, and that sort of determines our action or inaction, because we have to respect the wishes of survivors of abuse, and everything's assessed individually, but any information forms part of that puzzle and the bigger picture when we're assessing what we do.
I suppose when you're trying to do that assessment, I have some stats here from victim support actually estimating that a typical victim endures up to 35 assaults before speaking up. Mm-hmm. How do you handle that then? If someone's come to you with a concern, maybe, I'm worried about this person, how do you handle that?
So the information sits with us. The source of whoever gives that information to Crimestoppers, we don't know who it is, but it helps if we have one concern called in and we check on our system and there's been anonymous reports, then that would heighten our concerns, and we'd have to take positive action in terms of going to the address and trying to help people. If that information isn't there, then sometimes we wouldn't act. So it's really important that if people have got concerns to report it to Crimestoppers if they don't want us involved.
Trying to just set up that Isle of Man picture, do you have any figures or anything in terms of like what we deal with here? Because again, it's that small community thing. People maybe think it's not prevalent or it doesn't really happen. So do we have a picture of what it is like here?
So the Chief Constable's annual report from 2023-2024, in that 12-month period, there have been 475 victims of domestic abuse reported to us, of which 21% are repeat victims. and in that time we have issued 20 domestic abuse protection notices and 18 domestic abuse protection orders, and we already know from the figures for this year that that's increasing as well, and on average we deal with 2 domestic abuse incidences a day.
Wow.
So January alone, so far this year, there's been over 70 recorded domestic incidents. So that does include incidents where someone doesn't necessarily want to go forward, but it's come to police attention, and police have been and responded to that matter.
I suppose just interested in terms of the taking it forward then element in terms, because you said like the domestic abuse protection orders. How do you determine about taking it forward? Like, is that led by the police? Is that led by the victim? Like, is it an individual basis? How do you weigh up what goes then to court, or, you know?
It very much will depend on the situation, but the protection notices are civil rather than a criminal element. So sometimes there can be a criminal investigation, and alongside that parallel is running a civil matter. So it does depend on the circumstances, and sometimes protection notices are issued in situations where maybe there isn't enough evidence in terms of a charging decision, but we as police feel that that risk is at such level that we need to take positive action, as Emily mentioned earlier, and act on it, because we feel that if we don't, then that person could be at significant risk of harm. In the majority of circumstances, the victim is on board with us, but there are situations where sometimes that might not be the case, but obviously we're always acting in their best interests, and as Emily's mentioned, we do want to take their wishes into account, and ultimately, you know, it's really important to listen to them and what are their wishes.
Yeah, I suppose in that I should probably bring victim support in here. So how does victim support fit into this picture as well? I mean, we've said, like, obviously you might have someone concerned coming to Crimestoppers, and then that feeds into police. So tell me, where does victim support come in?
We obviously take referrals from the police. We work daily with the PVP department, and we will cross-refer, so we'll refer into the police as well where we have concerns about an individual. Not all individuals want to report to the police. What we do try and encourage in every circumstance, like Karen said from Crimestoppers, is that people do make that report. So sometimes it's like we'll do the video interview with the police, so the facts are recorded at the time, and then they may not want to take that. So again, as Emily's pointed out, they keep that as intel on the system. Our figures are fairly reflective of police figures in that across all our services during 2024, the whole year, we had 675 referrals in across all services, averaging over approximately 2 a day. That is continuing this year. Not all for domestic violence or domestic abuse, but about half for that, and sexual violence. And another 20% for sexual violence. So 65% of our referrals are in that sort of arena now.
So how do all the various agencies here work together in terms of getting this message out? And I suppose this is what this campaign's for as well, from Crimestoppers, in terms of some of these figures that you're throwing out will be quite shocking to people. People don't, and I suppose it's that behind closed doors type thing. So how do you encourage people to come forward? How do you educate people on the fact that this is a reality happening on the Isle of Man?
So we obviously do a lot of awareness work in organisations. I chair the Domestic Abuse Forum, which is part of the Community Safety Partnership in Government, which feeds into the Criminal Justice Board. So that involves the police. So Inspector Sam Cannell sits on that. We've got education, we've got Manx Care, we've got probation service, we've got all the different agencies, and we're sitting around and we're tasked with looking at how do we raise that awareness, essentially. So last year we ran a 2-day conference which was led by Victim Support, because we celebrated our 25th anniversary last year, but actually had a whole day focused on domestic abuse, and since that conference our referrals just absolutely spiked as a direct result of that conference. So I think what we have to do, and we're always very careful to do, and I know the police are the same, is it's not necessarily happening more. What we're doing now, and this is why we're seeing the referrals coming in and the increased, it is people are talking about it more, and there's that willingness now that it's not as taboo. 30 years ago it was all brushed under the carpet, it doesn't happen. What we're doing now and what we're seeing is people wanting to actually make those reports, or even just get some support and understand what's happening to them, and is it domestic abuse, because it's not all violence. Obviously coercive control is the biggest cause of domestic abuse, certainly from our figures, and I'd imagine that's equated in the police. So we just want to encourage people to come forward, and that's kind of doing an interview like this today is part of that process as well.
I know this week. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
This last week, the maternity unit did a healthy mum, healthy baby day, and we took part in that. And I just think multi-agency work has just come on leaps and bounds in the last few years, and we are really good at sharing that information now. People don't necessarily want to come to the police in the first instance, and it's just building those relations with whoever they feel comfortable with, and bringing it to us as and when they feel ready. It can come in lots of different ways for us as the police. Referrals from victim support, or they can turn up themselves at headquarters. And what will happen when they do that is usually a uniformed officer will speak to them and then make that assessment in terms of how we're going to proceed with it, and if it's sort of the lower level incidents are progressed by uniform, they've all had the training to deal with domestic abuse. As I said before, it happens twice a day. We're responding to it, so we're really good at recognising the high end instances and dealing with those as well. But we understand, everyone who's a victim will get a good service from us, and if needed, it'll be referred to our department, and specialist officers will support victims through the whole process, whether that be just talking to officers and offloading initially to the process of giving a video interview to officers and then going to court. And we work closely with victim support through that to ensure they get the best package of care. And of course the children in any families as well. I think that we can't forget that they're the greatest victims of any domestic abuse cases.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know you mentioned there, Lorna, that since that 2-day event you had last year, you've seen an increase in calls. I mean, have the police, have Crimestoppers, have you seen an increase in reporting around domestic abuse, even if over the years, maybe not in the last immediate 12 months?
So from the point of view of, we get figures back from the UK call centre where the contacts are made to tell us what's being reported. And actually domestic abuse is very low in terms of reporting, and that's another important reason I think for doing this now, is just to kind of raise awareness and let people know that service is available. So we get plenty of reports around drugs and drunk driving, etc. But actually domestic abuse is a crime. Just because it happens behind closed doors doesn't mean that it isn't. And Crimestoppers, it exists because we believe that everybody has a right to feel safe from crime, and that's even if they're in their own home.
Yeah.
And the statistics are never going to be truly representative of the full picture and the full scale, are they? And for us, the new legislation that's come into effect from 2023 has had a massive impact on how we as police respond to domestic incidents and how we can now move forward, investigate, and ultimately, at court as well. In terms of domestic abuse, I think there is a big myth still exists that it's physical, and that's predominantly what people focus on, but it certainly isn't. And controlling and coercive behaviour, we now have specific legislation to deal with that particularly, which is very powerful, and that may be potentially another reason why people are starting to come forward more, knowing that that's there and in place.
You mentioned it going to court there. I've done the odd court reporting session, and sometimes you do see people coming in and they're in breach of that protection order. I mean, are you seeing repeat offenders, and also how do you take a step above that then? If they're still breaching the order and you're trying to protect the victim, how do police try and respond to that sort of thing as well?
So that is in itself, that would be a criminal offence to breach that order. So, and it's also a breach in itself for the notices. So before there's an order issued, there's a protection notice. In most instances, sometimes the court will issue an order on conviction. So if someone breaches that notice, then police would take the suitable action to make sure that person is dealt with accordingly. And it would be the same in terms of the breaching of the orders as well. With the breach of the orders, they do come with their respective sentences as well. So that in itself, we would like to hope would be a deterrent for perpetrators to not breach that order.
Yeah, it's probably the wrong wording really, but is it a positive sign for you all that you're seeing more reports? Because actually, even though these figures seem to then be going up and up and up, are you taking that as positive? Because actually it's the flip of that, is more people are reporting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way we look at it, is we don't want anybody sort of suffering in silence, and knowing that they've got somewhere where it's safe, confidential to talk to. You know, that's why we do what we do day in, day out, is we don't want anyone not knowing where else to go or what else to do. So that's why it's so important that people do come forward. Yes, it's a kind of a double-edged sword for us, because obviously that puts pressure on the service, but at the moment we're coping with that increase, and we've just seen it year on year on year on year. It's not just the last 12 months. We were 30%, 37% up last year on 2023. 2023 was 30% up on the year before. So, and that is in domestic abuse cases. That's not just across the service, but also within domestic abuse. So we just want to see that continue, maybe not at the same high rate, but that actual increase, so because then we're doing our job right in terms of that awareness work, and and this continued multi-agency approach is working.
I think a big thing with the notices and orders, they are civil matters, so a lot of people are fearful of reporting and getting their partner into trouble, so they won't get a criminal conviction if they do as the order or the notice says. If it's breached, that's when it does form part of the criminal conviction, and they could spend time in prison if they breach it and it's serious. But if our sort of lower level intervention's done right and it's all adhered to, then it's a civil matter and they won't get that criminal record. So I think that doesn't, if people are aware of it, then they're more likely to come forward as well.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of times, obviously, with the police in terms of legislation, the sort of coercive control. Also, a big part of the Crimestoppers campaign currently is the various different types of domestic abuse. The fact that it isn't just physical or sexual, it could be financial or emotional, or or the sexual abuse as well, which has come up a few times. I suppose with the various agencies, I mean, is Crimestoppers seeing, in terms of, you said it's quite low that people necessarily ring up for domestic abuse, you see other things. Do you ever get calls that are just kind of like, I don't know if this is anything, are people unsure sometimes?
Yeah, so sometimes people will be. So for the Isle of Man in particular, a lot of reports are done online, and the online form helps you fill that in and put what you know down. But if people phone up, there are trained people at the end of the phone. We have groups of people who have specialist training. They will take the calls. They talk people through what they want to share with us. Obviously, no names, so it's completely anonymous. But often we can kind of help people explain what they feel the concern is, where they feel it's happening, and that can help then inform the report that will go through to the police. We can't send everything through to the police because sometimes the information that we get isn't sufficient to form a report. But a lot of the time it will be, and we do try and support people in that way. The other thing on the Crimestoppers site, which you'll have seen, is there are videos that kind of talk a little bit about the effect of domestic abuse on neighbours, on families, on children. As children got mentioned before, children are also victims of domestic abuse in a household. They see things, they hear things, can be very damaging, have lifelong effects. So, it's really important to encourage people to come forward and report. But the other thing that the website has is it talks about the 17 different myths around domestic abuse, and it also talks about types of domestic abuse. And we've talked about things like coercive control. There are all kinds of different sorts of domestic abuse, and again, it's just helping people recognise when they might be seeing things that concern them, or they might themselves be a victim. There are lots of other resources, I know, but that's the one that Crimestoppers have at the moment.
If anyone's listening to this and they they know that maybe they're being subject to some of the things, or they're listening and they are worried about someone. I know we've run through ringing Crimestoppers and the police, but what's the core message there to anyone that might be concerned?
Give us a call. A victim support, you don't necessarily always have to make a referral. We are there for providing information as well. So if you've got any concerns either about yourself and your own relationship or someone else's, pick up the phone, and obviously everything is confidential. Just ask the question, would you consider this abuse? And we can give some guidance on that, and if needed we can see a person just to either say yes, no, or actually this is what you can do, and then we can give some offers of how you could, if you've got concerns about another individual, how you could potentially sort of broach that with that individual. So we can give some guidance and support in that way as well. So, because not everyone wants to reach out and have that support. So it's understanding that the resources are there. It's on our website as well, but we just want to make sure that people don't over-analyse a relationship, but actually understand what is and what isn't, and we can give that good support as the police can, Crimestoppers, as Karen has said as well. So if in doubt, give us a call and we can certainly support with that.
Does anyone think I've missed anything that they want to add at all?
I think just in terms of the definition, I don't think we've covered exactly what it is, and it's
fine.
changed since the new legislation as well. So it was previously defined as 16 plus. So I don't know if you.
Yeah, I saw that online. Yeah, should we sort of clarify that then, I suppose, especially in terms of this new legislation here on the island? So what is the definition then in simple terms?
So in line with the implementation of the Domestic Abuse Act 2020, which came in January 2023, the definition changed, and significantly there's no longer an age specification within the Act regarding a domestic abuse incident. Previously it was defined as 16 plus. So partly that's because the introduction of the domestic abuse protection notices can be issued to perpetrators as young as 14 years old now. So just the definition itself is where the behaviour of a person towards another, where they're personally connected and that behaviour is abusive, and that can consist of anything from physical or sexual abuse, violent or threatening behaviour, controlling or coercive behaviour, economic abuse, or any psychological, emotional or other forms of abuse. So it takes many different forms, not just a physical assault. The message is that, like Victim Support have said, just if they've got any concerns at all, please come and report to us. We will listen, take their wishes into consideration. If it's an immediate safeguarding concern, we have to act. But a lot of the time, for these matters, it's happening over time. They can keep themselves safe. We'll work with the victims and really respect their wishes and do everything we can to support them. Before we go, we won't just go all guns blazing, locking people up unless it's absolutely needed. Sometimes it's just that listening ear, which the police will do along with other partners.
Perfect.
The other stuff is just intervention work, because we mentioned about children, and we run the NSPCC DART programme, which is to prevent or try and break the cycle of abuse. So a child who's been a victim of abuse or in an abusive family environment is quite likely to go on and become a perpetrator of the future, and we want to actually try and break that cycle. So we work with mum and child through that programme to rebuild their relationship after a perpetrator's left the family situation, but also show them what a healthy relationship looks like, because there's no such thing as a normal relationship, because what's normal for myself isn't going to be normal for you, but actually what a loving and a healthy relationship and a family relationship looks like. So we do that work, and I know that the probation service are doing work with convicted perpetrators of domestic abuse in order to try and break that cycle, so when they do come out they are rehabilitated, hopefully, and not become a perpetrator again in the future. So there's a lot of work going on amongst all the different agencies involved to try and reduce the level of domestic abuse, but at the same time raise that awareness.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.